Hello, this is the Philosophical Rebellion Substack. I want to talk about the Donald Trump agenda so far, because he has been isolating the United States on the world stage, causing economic chaos with his unilateral trade war against the entire world. He is trying to force Ukraine into a bad deal against Russia. He is aiding and abetting Netanyahu's genocide of the Palestinians, while bragging about the Riviera of the Middle East that he is going to build on top of the corpses of the millions of Palestinians he is helping to exterminate right now. And here at home, he is trying to make it so that his ICE agents can arrest anyone they allege of being a criminal, detain and deport them without any opportunity to dispute their arrest. And then once those people are trapped overseas in a foreign prison, Donald Trump is trying to abandon them and say that they are no longer his responsibility. And his administration is trying to lie and say that they are going after the worst of the worst, with the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia really getting a lot of attention because he is an alleged MS-13 member and an alleged human trafficker, which Donald Trump deported to an El Salvadorian prison, notorious for its human rights abuses. And the Republican Party is trying to paint the entire debate as if the Democrats want to bring back MS-13 members into the United States. But his case is particularly important, and the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 against the Donald Trump administration, ordering his administration to facilitate Kilmar Abrego Garcia's release from prison and the handling of his immigration proceedings as if he had never been wrongfully deported to El Salvador. So I want to read from the Supreme Court themselves, finding Donald Trump's administration to be in violation of the law. So this is a quote from the United States Supreme Court. The United States government arrested Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia in Maryland and flew him to a terrorism confinement center in El Salvador. To this day, the government has cited no basis in law for Abrego Garcia's warrantless arrest, his removal to El Salvador, or his confinement in a Salvadoran prison. The government now requests an order from this court permitting it to leave Abrego Garcia, a husband and father without a criminal record, in a Salvadoran prison for no reason recognized by the law. The only argument the government offers in support of its request, that the United States courts cannot grant relief once a deportee crosses the border, is plainly wrong. The government's argument, moreover, implies that it could deport and incarcerate any person, including United States citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene. So that's the end of the quote, and I really want to highlight that part again. The Supreme Court of the United States ruled 9-0 against the Donald Trump administration, deciding that the government's argument that they could deport and incarcerate any person, including United States citizens, without due process was illegal. So this is exactly what the Supreme Court ordered Donald Trump to do. This is another quote. The order properly requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been handled had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. So by Donald Trump refusing to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release, he is without a doubt disobeying the Supreme Court order. And in interviews, Donald Trump has admitted that he could get Kilmar Abrego Garcia released if he wanted to, just by picking up the phone and calling El Salvador's president. But Trump has personally said he doesn't want to, so he won't do it. And this is something every American should be worried about, because Donald Trump is sending masked ICE agents to arrest people without warrants, and they have already mistakenly deported multiple American citizens, including multiple children and one with cancer. But it gets so much worse than that, as a family from Oklahoma recently found out when over 20 ICE agents broke into their house in the middle of the night and marched them into the street in their underwear with guns pointed at their faces. All because they moved into a new house that was still receiving mail from somebody else that ICE was looking into. And in Donald Trump's America, that's what we can expect. The government to break into our houses at any time, take all of our possessions for a pretend investigation, arrest people for alleged crimes without warrants or any evidence, and deport them without the ability to prove their citizenship or dispute their arrest, then abandon people in some of the worst prisons in the world. So even if you support mass deportation, that is not what this is. This is a gross abuse of power, with Donald Trump trying to set the standard that he could arrest anybody for alleged crimes, and it doesn't even matter if the Supreme Court of the United States tells him that he is in violation of the law by doing so, because he can pick and choose when to obey Supreme Court orders. But he's got almost no pushback from the Republican Party, because they are a cult, and Donald Trump's word is their truth. And an example of that is Senator John Kennedy, who said that he loves the law like the devil loves sin. And if Donald Trump were to violate the Supreme Court, he would call him out on it. Yet specifically in reference to this case, to this situation where Donald Trump is obviously beyond any doubt violating the Supreme Court order, John Kennedy said he is not violating the law. And this is actually a really systemic issue in the entire Republican Party, because they have lost touch with objective reality, and now Donald Trump represents their truth. And it's been that way for a decade, since Donald Trump came into the 2016 primary and wiped the floor with them, saying, "Hey Rand Paul, you're ugly. Hey Ted Cruz, your wife's ugly. Hey Jeb Bush, you're boring and your brother sucked as president. And the rest of you are barely worth mentioning, so get in line to kiss my ass." And the 2016 Republican Party couldn't get in line any harder or faster for Donald Trump. And they've had their heads so far up his ass for the last decade that they don't know their left from their right unless he tells it to them. So when he says that Kilmar Abrego Garcia has MS-13 clear as day tattooed on his hand, it doesn't matter that it's a clearly photoshopped picture, because that is their reality. It doesn't matter that China said they have not had any ongoing trade negotiations, because Donald Trump says they're having daily ongoing trade negotiations. It doesn't matter that they can't announce the trade deals they've come to. Donald Trump says he has completed 200 trade deals, so they believe it. So the cult of the Republican Party, which controls both chambers of Congress and is supposed to be providing checks on Donald Trump's power, is totally failing in their duty to the United States Constitution. And they are failing to protect our freedoms, to be protected from things like warrantless arrest or the theft of our property from law enforcement without a warrant. And even for those who don't drink the Kool-Aid in Trump's Republican Party, they are still ruled by fear of retribution. As Senator Lisa Murkowski recently said, is that Trump's GOP is filled with scaredy cats worried about upsetting him because of the temper tantrum he might throw. And it would be great if the Democrats took back the House in 2026, but there's a lot of time between now and then. So we need the Republicans in Congress to grow some balls and start pushing back on Donald Trump's abuses of power. He is a senile old man trying to take away my rights and yours. And the Republican Party seems to have forgotten what the United States is all about. So here's a quote from Theodore Roosevelt about how we should be treating the President of the United States. "To announce that there must be no criticism of the President, or that we are to stand by the President, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, but is morally treasonable to the American public. Patriotism means to stand by the country. It does not mean to stand by the President or any public official. It is patriotic to support him insofar as he effectively serves the country. It is unpatriotic not to oppose him to the exact extent he fails in his duty to stand by the country. In either event, it is unpatriotic not to tell the truth, whether about the President or anyone else." And I'll end with this quote from former Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas. Since when have we as Americans been expected to bow submissively to authority and speak with awe and reverence to those who represent us? The American government is premised on the theory that if the individual is to be free, their thoughts, beliefs, ideology, philosophy must be placed beyond the reach of government. Restriction of free thought and free speech is the most dangerous of all subversions. It is the one un-American act that can most easily defeat us. And those quotes have a point. If Donald Trump is doing a good job, fine, support him. But he is not, and he is not respecting our freedoms and our rights as American citizens. And the Republican Party for the last decade has relinquished their freedom of thought to Donald Trump. They've handed over their entire conception of reality to him to dictate their truth. And as much as I wish that there were forces outside the Republican Party right now who could push back on the abuses of power from Donald Trump, right now the Republican Party controls the executive branch and both chambers of Congress. And we have a conservative Supreme Court and a federal judiciary staffed by a bunch of far-right Trump loyalists. So if we are to remain a free society where the American people can feel safe and protected from the abuses of power of even our law enforcement agencies like ICE, then it's going to have to come from the Republican Party and the government we have right now today.